There's been some administrative error, human error, in that Hadush Kebatu was due to be transferred by a prison van to an immigration removal centre for his deportation to Ethiopia. He had 3 months left of the custodial part of his sentence still to serve, but under new rules around deportations, he was eligible to be deported, straight away. So that's what he would have been expecting to happen. That's what the prison authorities and the immigration authorities wanted to happen. But somewhere along the line, whether there's been a problem with the paperwork, whether someone's made a mistake and let him out of the gate when he shouldn't have been, we don't exactly know.
Now, a manhunt is underway for a former asylum seeker who was mistakenly released from prison. Ethiopian national Hadush Kebatu was jailed for 12 months after sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. Prison sources said he was meant to be sent to an immigration detention centre ahead of being deported to Ethiopia. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister has said that Kebatu is currently at large in London. The Justice Secretary and Deputy PM David Lammy gave this update to journalists late last night.
I'm appalled and livid on behalf of the public that Kebatu is at large. He should be deported back to Ethiopia after the sexual assaults that he's committed. And of course, there is now a manhunt with Essex Police, the Metropolitan Police and British Transport Police looking for him. We know that he boarded a train and is at large in London. And of course, I've asked for a full investigation into what's happened, and an officer has been suspended.
So that's the Justice Secretary, David Lammy. In a moment, we'll get the thoughts of the former Conservative Attorney General, Dominic Grieve. But first, to bring us up to date, let's speak to Danny Shaw, Home Affairs expert and former advisor to Yvette Cooper, the former Home Secretary. Morning to you, Danny.
Good morning, Chloe.
Is it clear what on earth happened here?
It's not entirely clear. We obviously await the findings of the investigation, but what it seems as though there's been some administrative error, human error, in that Hadush Kebatu was due to be transferred by a prison van to an immigration removal centre for his deportation to Ethiopia. He had 3 months left of the custodial part of his sentence still to serve, but under new rules around deportations, he was eligible to be deported, straight away. So that's what he would have been expecting to happen. That's what the prison authorities and the immigration authorities wanted to happen. But somewhere along the line, whether there's been a problem with the paperwork, whether someone's made a mistake and let him out of the gate when he shouldn't have been, we don't exactly know. But it does appear that he was let out on the basis that he was going to be freed completely. He was given £76, we think, is his prisoner discharge grant. He was given his belongings in a bag. And you've seen that video of him walking in the streets in Chelmsford. I think he'd just gone to a shop to get some food. And we know he boarded a train from Chelmsford heading for London, which is where, according to David Lammy, he's now in the capital city.
I mean, this isn't an isolated incident in the sense that a report from His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service said 262 prisoners in England and Wales were released in error between April last year and March this year. That's up from 115 in the previous 12 months. Clearly, everyone is focused on this because he's a high-profile prisoner. But how can it happen so regularly?
Yeah, it's happening about 5 times every week that prisoners are released. One of the issues is that sentencing has become incredibly complex, and determining when prisoners are released is a really tricky process, because some are released at the 40% mark of their sentence. In fact, most are. Some at the 50% mark. Some are released wearing an electronic tag. Some are released without a tag. Some are transferred to immigration detention centres. And some have the periods that they spent on remand in prison deducted from their sentence. So it's a mathematical exercise, a logistical exercise, an administrative nightmare for prison staff, and that's why mistakes happen. Look, in a lot of these cases, it might be a few days early. Perhaps in some cases it might be a couple of days late. You don't get to hear about it because prisoners are not that high profile as Hadush Kebatu is. But the fact that it happened with him is a gross blunder, I'm afraid, because of all the prisoners in Chelmsford. Chelmsford holds around 600 to 700 prisoners. It's not a huge prison. Of all the prisoners there, you would have thought the governor and the deputy governor would have been focused on Kebatu to ensure that everything was done in accordance with all the rules in the regime. And you would have thought that all the paperwork would be double checked in his case, and it clearly wasn't.
Can this be put down to prison overcrowding, low morale amongst prison officers, cuts under the Conservative government of several thousand prison officers? Or are we just trying to read too much into it and it's just human error? What would your assessment be?
Look, all those things play a part, Chloe. The prison service is stretched. That's why there's an early release program. That's why drastic changes to sentencing are having to be pushed through Parliament, because there aren't enough prison places for the number of inmates, and that puts a strain on staff. Many of the workforce are very inexperienced, because thousands of prison staff left during the austerity years under the Tories. But you can't keep blaming that for this. Someone has made a mistake, or one or two people have made a bad mistake, and it reflects very poorly, I think, on the prison. I would say one other thing is that the interface between the prison system and the immigration system has always been very poor. The two are not well coordinated. You might remember back in the midst of time in 2007, a scandal over the release from prison of over 1,000 foreign national prisoners who should have been considered for deportation. They were released from prison. That led to the resignation of Charles Clarke, who was then Home Secretary. This has been a problem that has gone back decades, and we've seen it surfaced again in this most high profile and notorious of cases.
It's a huge embarrassment for the government, clearly, as you've said. How much can they be held responsible then?
Well, ultimately, of course, the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, is responsible for the prison system, and Shabana Mahmood, Home Secretary, responsible for immigration. So ultimately, they have to, take some of the responsibility and do all that they can to ensure it doesn't happen again. But I don't think you can hold them, in this case, personally liable for an individual problem at Chelmsford Prison. There are thousands of prisoners being released every week, and so certainly every year. At Chelmsford, I think I understand the figures are 200 prisoners every month are coming into the jail. That means probably around the same number are going out of the jail. There's a big churn, which is the word that's used, and that obviously makes it difficult to manage, and mistakes will happen. But I keep coming back to this one prisoner. There should have been double and triple check the processes to ensure that everything was done right, in terms of his management, and that he got to the immigration centre for his deportation.
Danny, always good to get your analysis. Thank you so much. That's Danny Shaw, Home Affairs expert and former advisor to the former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.